The city never sleeps, and neither does the memory of a love story that changed everything. Decades ago, a man lost in business and a woman searching for her own worth crossed paths on the glowing streets of Beverly Hills. What started as chance became destiny. What seemed like a deal became a dream, and what was thought to be impossible turned into one of the most unforgettable romances ever told. Now, after more than 30 years, the story continues. Time has passed, but the spark between them has not faded. The question is no longer about whether they can fall in love, it is about whether love can survive the weight of years, secrets, and the battles that come with life itself. Edward Lewis has built his life around wealth, power, and precision. The city of Los Angeles still whispers his name in the corridors of business empires, but behind the polished walls of success lies a man no longer seeking deals, but meaning. Vivian Ward, once a symbol of daring charm and raw honesty, is now a woman of strength and elegance, having shaped her own world beyond the shadow of her past. Together, they built a life many could only dream of, one filled with grand moments, laughter, and challenges. Yet even the strongest love faces the quiet storms that come not from strangers, but from within. The sequel opens not with fireworks, but with silence, a reminder that time humbles even the brightest lights. We are shown a world where Edward and Vivian stand side by side, but their eyes speak of unspoken thoughts. Success and love have been theirs, yet questions linger. What happens when the fairy tale becomes real life? What happens when love must grow, adapt, and face the truths that time cannot hide? Their story has never been about perfection, but about choice. In this new chapter, both must decide again whether love is not only worth finding, but worth fighting for. Life has given them everything and, at the same time, tested their bond in ways neither expected. Edward, now a man who has seen empires rise and fall, faces his most personal struggle, the fear of losing the one thing he cannot buy, time with the woman he loves. Vivian, once underestimated by the world, now holds her own stage, confident but still carrying the softness that first captured Edward's heart. Their love is a reflection of two people who found each other when the world said they shouldn't, and who now must hold on when the world demands they let go. The streets of Beverly Hills remain the same luxury, glitter, and endless promises of dreams, but Edward and Vivian have changed. Their love must now exist in a space where reality is sharper, and where the dreams they once chased are no longer enough to keep them safe. The audience is drawn into a setting both familiar and new, a grand city alive with beauty, but behind every smile and sparkle lies the shadow of doubt. It is in this world that the sequel asks us to believe again, not in chance encounters, but in the power of love to stand against the tests of life itself. Love does not disappear when two people stay together, it changes. It bends, it grows, and sometimes it breaks in ways no one expects. For Edward and Vivian, the glow of their fairy tale has never fully dimmed, but the light flickers when shadows creep in. After years of standing side by side, they now find themselves staring at questions they never thought they would ask. Can the man who once believed he could buy the world learn to accept that not everything can be controlled? Can the woman who once taught him to dream still hold on when reality begins to pull them apart? These questions are not whispered in the background anymore. They rise in the silence between their words, in the space between their hands when they almost touch but hesitate. Edward's empire, built on sharp decisions and risk, is no longer only a blessing. It has become a wall. His return to high-stakes deals, after swearing he had left them behind, creates cracks in their bond. Vivian, who once felt the thrill of being swept into a world of wealth and promise, no longer sees the sparkle in those endless business dinners and late nights at the office. She has her own voice now, her own dreams that stretch beyond the glitter of Beverly Hills, and the clash between who they were and who they are becoming begins to surface. In moments where laughter should be, silence lingers. In moments where love should be enough, doubt slips in quietly. But love's greatest test does not always come from within, it comes when the past decides to return. A face from Edward's history appears, someone who knows his world of business and charm too well. This presence carries more than memories. It carries secrets that Edward has never shared, choices he made long before Vivian, choices that could shatter the trust they built. Vivian, who has always believed in honesty and heart, begins to see Edward through a different light. Not as the man who saved her, not as the prince who lifted her into another life, but as a man with flaws too deep to ignore. And yet, Vivian herself is not free from ghosts of the past. The world never forgets, and her beginnings once whispered about, judged, and dismissed her turn in cruel whispers. A journalist hungry for scandal, a rival eager to tear apart her dignity, and a society still unwilling to forgive where she came from. These forces rise against her. For the first time in years, Vivian is made to feel small again, as if her love story was never meant to last. She must face not only the judgment of the world, but the weight of wondering if Edward still sees her as the woman she has become, or if he too is haunted by who she used to be. The conflict builds like a storm, not with loud crashes at first, but with quiet thunder in the distance. Edward and Vivian find themselves caught in moments of misunderstanding, where words are left unsaid and fears are left to grow unchecked. The dinners feel colder, the nights feel longer, and though they live in the same house, their hearts begin to drift in dangerous silence. The fairy tale once built on chance and fire now trembles under the weight of reality. And then the storm finally strikes. A night meant to be a celebration, a gala where the world watches, becomes the stage for the first visible crack. A careless remark, an old rival's smirk, a whispered secret exposed at the wrong moment, and suddenly the perfect couple is no longer perfect in the eyes of those around them. The world sees the pain they tried to hide, and for Edward and Vivian, the fight to protect their love is no longer private. Yet, even in conflict, the story reminds us why we believed in them in the first place. Because love worth having is love worth fighting for. Edward and Vivian are not broken. They are tested. The conflict is not their ending, but their call to rise again. The audience is left holding their breath, waiting to see if the man who once climbed the fire escaped for love and the woman who once dared to dream bigger than her world will choose each other again when it matters most, when love is tested. It does not vanish, it transforms. Edward and Vivian, though shaken by the storms around them, begin to rediscover the threads that tied their souls together decades ago. The world may be colder, harsher, and louder than before, but in the quiet spaces between them still lives the warmth of something eternal. This section is not about fairy tales or perfect moments, but about love stripped of glamour and faced with truth. Edward, for all his power, finds himself standing in front of Vivian not as the polished man in a suit, but as someone stripped down to his core. He has always been defined by the empire he built, by the sharpness of his choices and the strength of his ambition. Yet none of those things matter when he realizes that every late night at the office, every decision made without her by his side, has only deepened the space between them. For the first time in years, he admits his fear not of losing wealth or reputation, but of losing her. Edward's vulnerability, raw and unpolished, reminds Vivian of the man who once climbed a fire escape with nothing but flowers and hope. Vivian, too, undergoes a quiet transformation. She is no longer the woman waiting to be chosen or rescued. Life has given her the tools to stand tall, to create her own identity beyond the story of a once pretty woman who defied the odds. Yet even in her strength, she carries tenderness, the same spark that made Edward see her not as someone to hide, but someone to hold. In her eyes, love is not about the past or the judgment of others. It is about the choice to keep building, brick by brick, no matter how many cracks appear. Together, they begin to search for each other again in the simplest of ways. The grand dinners and glittering events fade to the background, replaced by quiet walks through the city, unspoken apologies held in the way fingers intertwine, and laughter rediscovered in the smallest of moments. Edward learns to listen, not to respond, but to understand. Vivian learns to forgive, not to forget, but to move forward. It is in these acts of simplicity that their bond begins to mend, stronger than the weight of luxury, stronger than the whispers of the world. But the romance is not only soft and tender, it is fiery. Their passion, long buried under years of routine, resurfaces with intensity. They remember what it was like to be daring, to take risks not for business, but for love. Vivian pushes Edward to break free from the life of endless control, to rediscover spontaneity. Edward pulls Vivian closer, reminding her that he sees not her past, but her present, not the judgments of the world, but the woman she has become. In this dance between fire and softness, they find balance again. The echoes of their past also return in the form of memories, recreated with a new depth. The opera, once a grand gesture, becomes a night not of spectacle but of shared wonder. The necklace that once symbolized a playful trick becomes a reminder of how far they have come. Each callback is not a repetition, but a renewal, proof that their love story is not frozen in time, but capable of evolving just as they have. The audience sees not to people trying to recapture what once was, but to souls proving that love can survive change and even thrive in it. As their bond grows stronger, they begin to face the world again, no longer hiding behind masks of perfection. Edward does not deny his past mistakes, and Vivian does not run from the whispers of her beginnings. Instead, they choose to stand together, hand in hand, daring the world to look and judge, daring the world to doubt them. This courage makes their romance not only about passion, but about resilience. Their love is not fragile, it is unbreakable. And in the midst of this emotional journey, the music of their lives rises. Not just in grand, sweeping themes, but in the rhythm of small acts. A shared smile at sunrise, a quiet promise whispered at night, a laughter that cuts through the heaviness of doubt. Their love story shifts from being a fairy tale to being something even greater, real, imperfect, but deeply alive. By the end of this chapter, the audience is not just reminded of why Edward and Vivian fell in love, but is convinced that their story is far from over. Love is not the absence of conflict, nor the guarantee of perfection. It is the promise to keep choosing each other again and again, no matter the years, no matter the battles, no matter the scars. And in Edward and Vivian's embrace, we see not just the return of passion, but the triumph of a love that has learned to survive everything the world has thrown at it. The closer love grows, the more fragile it becomes under the eyes of the world. Edward and Vivian, though they have rekindled the flame of their passion, cannot escape the storm gathering on the horizon. Their enemies, whether rivals in business, voices from the press, or ghosts from their past, do not simply vanish because they have chosen each other again. Instead, these forces press harder, pushing them to the edge where one wrong step could tear apart everything they have rebuilt. The tension begins quietly, like a glass trembling on the edge of a table, and then grows louder, demanding resolution. Edward faces his breaking point in the place he once felt untouchable, the boardroom. A deal that promises more wealth and influence than ever before comes with a cost he never expected. It demands sacrifices that touch Vivian's dignity, her independence, and her right to live free of judgment. For the first time, Edward hesitates. The man who once made decisions with ruthless clarity now looks at the papers in front of him as though they are chains, not contracts. His empire, once his crown, begins to feel like a cage. He must choose between the life he has built and the woman who has given that life meaning. Vivian, too, reaches her moment of truth. The world that once dismissed her now watches closely, ready to tear apart her every move. An old scandal resurfaces, manipulated by those who would rather see her as a story of shame than a woman of resilience. Invitations to society dinners vanish, cruel whispers echo in the halls of wealth, and even the people she once called friends begin to step back. Yet Vivian does not crumble. She stands taller, stronger, refusing to let the past define her again. But she wonders, will Edward stand with her when the world demands he step away? Or will he, like so many before, let go to protect his image? The climax builds in a sequence of moments that strike with the force of destiny. A gala, glittering and grand, becomes the battlefield for their love. Surrounded by polished smiles and sharp glances, Edward and Vivian stand exposed. Secrets are spilled, accusations whispered, and the weight of expectation threatens to crush them both. Vivian's eyes glisten with hurt, Edward's with determination, and for a moment it seems as if the fairy tale has finally shattered. The world waits for Edward to turn away, to protect himself from scandal. Instead, he does the one thing no one expects. He chooses her openly, fiercely, in front of everyone. His words cut through the noise, his hand takes hers. And his silence is replaced with a vow not just to love her, but to fight for her dot in that instant. The story that began decades ago on the streets of Beverly Hills finds its rebirth. Edward and Vivian do not stand as a businessman and a woman once judged, but as partners, equals, bound by a love no longer hidden or fragile. The music swells, not with fairy tale sweetness, but with triumph. It is not the story of a prince saving a woman, nor a woman rescuing a man, but of two souls choosing each other again despite the cost. The final scenes carry both nostalgia and renewal. The city lights reflect in their eyes as they walk hand in hand, not into a perfect future, but into a real one. The opera house glimmers once more. The fire escape stands as a silent reminder of where it all began, and the streets of Beverly Hills whisper their legend. But this time, the story belongs not to chance or fate, it belongs to them. The closing leaves the audience with a message deeper than romance. Love is not about avoiding storms, but about finding the courage to dance in the rain together. Edward and Vivian's journey proves that fairy tales are not only for the young or the beginning of a story they can be rewritten, retold, and relived at any stage of life. The screen fades to black with the promise of continuation, of love not finished but renewed, and the bold words appear. Pretty Woman 2, love has no age, only destiny.